because Paul used to book me and Stuffy, and he used to book me, and there was a whole scene there. But when he booked you, you would usually play a Wednesday through a Saturday. You know, you do 3 or 4 sets a night. And I was playing one night, and I had just written this tune called Rock, Rock, Roxanne. And I was playing that tune, and a guy comes up to me after the set. He says, "That song, Roxanne, you wrote that?" I said, "Yeah." And I had a big beard and granny glasses, and my hair was all out, and blue jeans and t-shirt, and I, you know, was like this sort of hippie freak guy. And this guy says to me, "That's a hit song. You shave your beard, you get rid of your glasses, you put that tune out, you're going to be a star." And I'm looking at this guy like, you know. So we talked for a minute, and finally I said, "So who are you? What do you do?" He says, "My name's Gene Simmons. My band Kiss just signed to Casablanca Records." Well, he came down, I don't know if it was the next night, but it was during that week that I was playing with some guys from his management company. They were interested. They thought, "Hey, this guy's..." And you know, I didn't want to hear about wearing makeup and changing. I wasn't into image. I just wanted to play music, you know. So, you know, I may have missed my big break. But the amazing thing about this is, this was 74, 75. So about 5, 6, maybe 7 years later, I'm playing with Johnny Winter. Johnny and I go to see Rick Derringer at the Ritz, and Gene and Paul are there. And after the show, everybody's in the dressing room getting introduced around, and somebody says, "John, you know Gene Simmons?" And I go to shake his hand. I said, "We met before." And he shakes my hand and he goes, "Roxanne, right?" And I couldn't believe that he remembered the tune. You know, I mean, that shows what a sharp guy he is. Well, hindsight 2020 again. If I had had my together, I would have said, "Well, that's," you know, he said, "That's a great tune." I said, "Well, I should have said, if it's such a great tune, why don't you guys do it?" You know, but I wasn't thinking like that back then. I was playing with Johnny. Johnny was playing the blues. That was, I was doing good. You know, I had my own band on the side around New York and Connecticut and Long Island. We'd play around it. So I wasn't thinking business. And, you know, it kills me, because if that song had been on a Kiss record, you know.
Yep, you'd still be earning.
Yeah, yeah.
So then Johnny Winter ran for a good long while.
Roughly 10 years. I mean, there was, from 78 to 89, there was a period in there where Johnny wasn't working that much. But mostly for that 10 or 11 years, we played all the time. And, you know, we'd go out for 6 weeks and then take a week off, go out for a month, take 2 weeks off, go to Europe, go, you know, all over.
That was your first kind of...
Well, my first big, like, national gig was playing with Robert Gordon and Link Wray. And that was a great experience, working with Link especially.
That's the first big road warrior.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'd been on the road. You know, Dynamite Duck played all over the Midwest. Ox, you know, you remember, we used to drive to Eau Claire, we'd drive to Madison, we'd drive to Green Bay. You know, yeah. I mean, we were all over the Midwest, and we used to go to Iowa. You know, or we'd go with short stuff. I'd play in Michigan, and you know, Dynamite Duck played in Chicago, and you know, as I had said, we played everywhere. I couldn't, you know, I couldn't think of anything else except trying to go somewhere else. You know, a lot of our friends went to L.A. You know, when Stuffy moved to New York, I said, yeah, well, maybe this could work. But Rob Stoner used to play at the bitter end, and I got to know Rob, and he had recorded with Robert and Link when they first connected and really launched that rockabilly revival. I mean, Robert and Link really spearheaded that thing that led to the Stray Cats and the whole roots rockabilly thing that came after that. But Rob got the gig with Dylan, with Rolling Thunder, which Paul Colby introduced me to Dylan at the bitter end, and Dylan asked me what I did, and I said I play guitar and bass and harmonica, and he said, do you sing? And I said, yeah, I can sing a little bit. And, you know, he was looking for guys for the Rolling Thunder thing. And Stoner became the musical director and left Robert and Link and recommended me to play bass. And Robert called me up and I went and auditioned, and you know, Anton Fig was the drummer. Anton and I roomed together, and that was really the first big gig. We went to Europe for a month, we were in Canada, we were on the States a little bit, and then Stoner came back from Rolling Thunder and they wanted him back in the band. So he got me the gig and then he took the gig back. But that was cool, you know. And I got to be very good friends with Link. I mean, he had me sit in some of his last gigs in New York. He invited me to play harp and sing, and he was just a treasure, a real national treasure, real rock and roll spirit. And those tunes like Rumble and Ace of Spades and Jack the Ripper, and you know, and he had a great singing voice. When I first heard Link sing, I wondered, why does he need Robert Gordon? This guy's a great singer. But Robert had, I mean, anybody that wants to sing, Robert had the voice, man. What a great voice. You know, still sings great. You know, when they talk about guys who can sing the phone book and still sound great, he's just so gifted, and he had a presence. So I mean, the press was Robert Gordon the voice, Link Wray the guitar. You know, I mean, it was a great match for the time. And that was my first really big gig, and I learned a lot from Link, and it was great to play with Anton because, you know, we've worked together over the years, and he's done so well. I mean, he's just a great drummer. And so after Stoner got the gig back that he had given me, you know, I played around with my own band for a while, and I met Johnny Winter in the Village. He was playing at this club called Pops, and he was at this club called Pops where Louisiana Red was playing, and I knew Red because I jammed with him at Folk City. And Amy Madden, who was my bass player in New York for years, and we still play together, we were dating at the time, and you know, we were out on a date out in the town. I said, let's go to the Lone Star and see James Cotton. Well, we look in the window, and James didn't have his old band. There, you know, Matt Murphy was gone, and Charles Calmese was gone, and I said, boy, you know, I don't know if we should see James. This isn't his regular band. Let's go to Pops and see Louisiana Red. And we walk into Pops, and there's Johnny Winter sitting talking to Red. So the three of us wound up jamming, me and harp, and Johnny and Red on guitars till like 4 in the morning, you know, at this club. And I went up to Johnny and I said, you know, I'm a fan, and I play guitar and I play bass and harmonica, and you know, if you ever need anybody, here's my number. And Johnny was like, oh yeah, thanks man, you know, I'll take your number, but you know, I got my band, you know, but I'll take your number. Well, he didn't have a band. He had a drummer. His bass player, Randy Hobbs, had left, and the story I heard was that the next day he called Bobby Torello, the drummer, said, hey Bobby, I got us a bass player. And Bobby's going, well, Johnny, what's he like? Where's he from? Is he any good? How does he play? And Johnny goes, I don't know. I only heard him play harp. So Johnny called me and said, I'm going back to see Red. Can you come down and bring your bass? So I went down, rolled my amp and my bass from the middle village, Bleecker and Sullivan, to the East Village on the street, you know, because, I don't know, it's like a mile, half a mile across, to Pops, and wound up jamming with Red again. And Red had brought his guys. He had a drummer, and Johnny and Edgar and Bobby and all their girlfriends showed up, and we all jammed. And that was like my audition, you know. And I think your connection with Steve sort of cemented the thing.
Steve Paul.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, so you played with Johnny for 10 years.
Roughly.
What about after the Johnny Winter period?
Well, I really tried to concentrate on doing my own band. And, you know, I had some steady gigs. I had Dan Lynch's, which was a pretty regular gig, and you know, there were always, at this point in the late 80s, early 90s, there were tons of places popping up to play in New York. And, you know, we got gigs, and I used to run a jam at Kenny's Castaways, and I ran a jam at the Tin Palace, and you know, New York was still jumping, as, you know, and there were a lot of places to play, and places outside of New York, as I mentioned, Long Island and New Jersey and Connecticut, and you know, we opened for the Thunderbirds in Boston, and we go down to Baltimore, and you know, wherever we could get a gig, and you could do it pretty regularly back then, and you could get gigs. Like we used to play at Home Bar in New York. You could play a Wednesday through Saturday in the same club, you know, which was unheard of now, you know, and you know, it was kind of the closest thing you get to the Beatles playing Hamburg, you know. That's how bands really got it together. So there was this other place, Broadway Charlie's, where we played for a year, every Monday night. And then we would play every 6 weeks or so. We would play a Wednesday through a Sunday. So there were some weeks where we played 6 nights straight. You know, it was great. So, you know, I kept the band going as much as I could, and I also got a call from Chris Spedding to play bass with him. He was, you know, there was sort of this Robert Gordon alumni group. You know, it was me and Stoner and Anton and Bobby Chenard and Kenny Aronson and Tony Garnier and, you know, Danny Gatton and Spedding and Duke Robillard, I think, was in there for a while, you know. So there was a group of us that were sort of rockabilly lovers and I toured with Chris, and he's a monster guitar player.
I think, Jon, when you gesture across where the receiver is or the transmitter is, it's blocking the signal back to the mic here.
So we should start at the beginning?
Yeah, what's your name?
No, we don't start at the beginning.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
You know, it's that Jewish Italian, you know, talking with your hands.
It's that you've been in New York too long.
Yeah, yeah.
And what about Bo Diddley?
Well, you know, when my band, Bo's manager called my band to back up Bo in the early 80s, and I think we did a half a dozen or a dozen gigs with Bo around the New York area. And I'll never forget, one of the first times we played with him was some club. It was like a ballroom kind of club in New Jersey. And this was maybe 81, 82. I don't remember exactly. I have to look at my calendars. But we hit the stage, and Bo went into that gong, 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 and it was 1958. You know, the people just started grooving, and Bo was singing. What a great singer! Oh man, and probably one of the best rhythm guitar players ever. I mean, the minute he hit that groove, it just was locked in. And so we did those few gigs, but I was playing with Johnny, so I couldn't commit. And it was years later, in the late 90s, that some of my drummer friends were playing with Bo, and I used to sub on guitar once in a while, and then started doing that pretty regularly. You know, they asked me to stay with the band, and working with Bo is, you know, like Link Wray, you know, here's one of the true rock and roll spirits. I mean, Bo Diddley, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Jerry Lee Lewis, Elvis, those were the guys. You know, they wrote the book. And yeah.
When you listen to Bo's records, I mean, really listen to his records critically, they're fabulous.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, those are those kind of records I was talking about before. You can put on a tune like Can't Judge a Book and listen to it 20 times. It's just fresh, and you know, he was just a treasure and a great guy. I mean, Bo was really a great person to hang with. He had great stories. You know, he just really easygoing guy, and one of my favorite stories. You know, musicians and probably entertainers in general talk about, you know, you meet so many people and you perform for, you know, depending on how high you are or low you are, for tens of thousands of people or hundreds of thousands of people. Everybody knows you, but you don't always know everybody that you meet. And it's just interesting to see how these different celebrities meet. And I was coming down the elevator with Bo on the way to a gig, and the doors open about halfway down, and these guys get on the elevator, and there's Bo Diddley, you know. And and these guys are like, oh, you know, I mean, imagine the doors open and there's Bo Diddley. So these guys are like, oh man, it's Bo Diddley. Hey Bo, remember me? Man, hey, remember that gig in LA? I was backstage and you signed my thing, and it was, man. And Bo just said, oh, hold it. I'm sorry, man. I don't remember you. But how you doing? And I just thought, how cool is that, you know? And he was like that. He was just a great guy, you know, and a super talent. So you know, we miss him. He was great.
So you've been all around the world, played with some great talent.
Well, the main, you know, I often tell people one of the highlights of my life, and this relates back to Milwaukee, was getting to know Les Paul. And that, you know, I talk about, there's a website, Les Paul Foundation, I think, .org something, I can't remember, but there's a blog site dedicated to Les, and it's great. Steve Miller's got some great stories on there. And, you know, people write in and they talk about Les, and I tell the story. They asked me to tell about meeting Les, and I talk about it on the blog. And a friend of mine, Perry Margolef, who was a roommate, I used to live at his loft, took me down to Fat Tuesdays in New York and introduced me. And he had known Les for years. Perry was very knowledgeable about recording and about guitars, and took me down. And he introduces me to Les. He says, Les, this is Jon Paris. He plays with Johnny Winter. Didn't say what instrument. And, you know, I told Les I was a fan, and, you know, I play guitar, and it's great to hear him play, and we talked a little bit. And I said, you know, Les, I'm from Milwaukee. He says, oh, you're from Milwaukee? I'm from Waukesha. You know, I mean, like, he loved the homies, you know. It was, oh, you're from Wisconsin? Fellow Badger, you know. I mean, it was, what an amazing human being, really amazing. So eventually he says to me, you play with Johnny Winter, huh? He says, do you play the harmonica? I mean, it was like, he vibed it out, you know. I said, well, actually I do. You know, with Johnny I play bass and I play harmonica on a rack. And he says, well, you ought to come and sit in sometime. And that was it. You know, our friendship built over the years. And it started out where he would say, we got a harmonica player out there, we're going to get him up. You know, harmonica was my first instrument, and, you know, I got it off this ditch digger when I was growing up in Waukesha. I was a kid, and I loved the harmonica, and you know, that was my first instrument. This guy plays harmonica, and I think you'll enjoy him. Jon Paris, he plays with the Jonathan Winters Blues Band. And, you know, once I got to know Les over the years, I realized that he was just, you know, he's a rascal. He was a rascal, you know. So it got to be where sometimes he'd call me up and sometimes he wouldn't, depending on how many other guests he had or whatever. And then eventually over the years, it got to be a shtick, you know, where he'd call me up and he'd talk about how he started on harmonica, and he'd say, John, hey, can you make that thing sound like a train? You know, because if you're a harmonica player, you got to make it sound like a train. You know, so I do a little train thing. Yeah, that's good. Let's play some blues. Do a low down blues. Do a low down funky blues. And we started to get a repertoire, and you know, and I started to get really into the jazz music that I always loved. You know, the standards, and I mean, it just, and then I started to realize that a lot of the Beatles stuff, if you had to define the Beatles, it's sort of like 40s jazz standards with a rock beat. I mean, a lot of their changes, you know, McCartney's dad was a band leader, Lennon's mother played ukulele, all that music, you know, and you know, McCartney says to Les, there's an interview with Les and Paul, and And Paul says, you know, John and I used to play all your stuff. You know, we did How High the Moon and The World Is Waiting for the Sunrise. And Les goes, oh, you mean I started the Beatles? And in a way, you know, it was guys like him that did. I mean, he is such an important guy. I can't say enough about him, and it's really like the highlight of my life that I got to know him. You know, I got to sit in with him many times, and he was a huge influence, and got to play with him at Carnegie Hall on his 90th birthday. I sang the finale song with him and 15 other legendary guitar players. You know, it was just incredible. And I miss him a lot too. And you know, I remember one time I got there late, and he said, John, where you been? I said, well, you know, I've been out on the road with Bo Diddley. Les, you know that. And he's, oh, you're still playing with Bo Diddley? Does he still have that cigar box guitar? You know, I mean, Les knew, you know, even though he was a jazzer and he knew Django Reinhardt and Charlie Christian and Benny Goodman and Louis Armstrong, even though that's kind of what he came out of, he knew the rock guys. He knew Bo and Chuck Berry, and he knew later on, he knew the Jeff Becks and the Jimmy Pages, and, you know, he had his ear to the ground, you know, very, very sharp.
So tell us about this reunion this week.
Oh, is that what this is? Well, you know.
Well, you played your own gig first.
Yeah, I played at Summerfest. I've been playing Summerfest kind of since it started. You know, the Ox played there in the early '70s, and you know, we would play every year. And then when I moved to New York, there were several years where I would just go to Summerfest when I'd come back to visit my folks. I'd just go down and sit in with Steve Cohen and Bill Stone, or I'd sit in with Jim Lieben, or, you know, if I knew somebody down there, I sat in with Southside Johnny one time, and, you know. And then about 15, almost 20 years ago, I started playing with my own group, and have been playing every year since 90, 91. And it's been great. We opened for B.B. King, we opened for Buddy Guy, George Thorogood a couple of times, and Little Feat, and Dr. John, and Alvin Bishop. And it's been a great experience. It's such a great festival. So the other night we opened for Buddy Guy, and we opened for Buddy's guy, who is a hot young guitar player that opened for Buddy, and we opened for him. And it was great. Had a great response. And then tomorrow is the big Ox Hound Dog reunion. So,
and you guys have been...
And I haven't played bass in a band since Johnny Winter, probably. I mean, I've sat in with people, and I played bass on my records and on my demos, but I really haven't done a bass gig in all those years. And I enjoy playing bass. You know, rehearsal was fun. You know, it was easier than I thought it would be. But so that'll be fun. And then Saturday is the big Shank Hall thing.
So do you have any advice you'd like to pass on?
Keep your day job. I wish I had a day job. I mean, music, you know, this is a whole other subject, but it's really in the midst of a lot of weird revolutions. I mean, the way people perceive music, young people coming up, I think, unfortunately, a lot of them take it for granted. You know, even kids who love music, and they love their, you know, they won't go anywhere without their iPod or whatever. I think it means something different than it did to us. I think that the whole, you know, 40s pop jazz era into the 50s rock era into the 60s kind of Hendrix, you know, Zeppelin, Cream, you know, Grateful Dead, that whole era, and then the 70s, all the metal bands and the, you know, the pyrotechnics, you know, the Eddie Van Halen's, you know, all that stuff. It doesn't mean as much to kids today. I hope I'm wrong, but you know, it just seems that way to me.
You think it's that they don't have inspiration in the contemporary bands?
That may be, but I think it largely has to do with technology. I mean, when you can go to YouTube and watch whoever you want, and there's, you know, I was thinking, I don't, this is just a little theory of mine, you know, when we were growing up and Sunday night Ed Sullivan would present the cream of the crop in entertainment. And you'd watch Ed Sullivan going, this is what's hot in you know, circus acts or jazz or rock or whatever. You know, you're right. And this is the top entertainment in the world today. You know, got Ed's stamp of approval. You know, which is the Beatles and, you know, everything, and Topo Gigio and, you know, whatever.
Senior Wincest.
Yeah, right. But you go on YouTube and there's no barometer. You know, you get some guy, you know, at his kid's birthday party gets 2 million hits, and some kid made a demo. He might be the next Dylan, and he only gets 600 hits. You know, there's no way to really say this is what's hot. You know, and like everything in life, it's a blessing and a curse, I think. I don't know.
Well, I think it was Local 8, our musicians local, that had those little bumper stickers that says live music is best.
Amen.
It doesn't seem to me that this generation has the kind of live opportunities that we had.
Well, exactly. I mean, when I think of, you know, I think of the Beatles.
To play or to listen.
When I think of the Beatles playing Hamburg 6-7 nights a week, 6 to 8 hours a night, and really getting it together, where can a young band do that? There's nowhere, you know. And you get young bands practicing in their loft or in their garage or in their basement. You know, they'll practice 6 nights a week, and then they'll do a showcase somewhere, you know, once a month or once every 6 months or whatever. You know, the opportunities aren't there. I mean, when the Ox was together, you know, there was this CYO dance, there was this teen bar, there was this nightclub, there was, you know, this college gig. You know, 5, 6, 7 nights a week we could work. You know, and we got good. You know, we were kind of shaky in the beginning, and we really got good. You know, so it's hard. It's a different world now. You know, and yet it's so commercialized. You know, I mean, everybody. You know, you've got rock and roll fantasy camp. Everybody wants to be a rock star. You know, everybody wants to play guitar, and unfortunately, you know, it's like Sonny Boy Williamson, that story where he went to England or Europe to tour, and he came back, and I think it was Robbie Robertson of the band used to back them. Used to back Sonny Boy, and he came back from Europe, and they asked him how was it, and Sonny Boy was like, "Oh man, those English kids, man, they want to play the blues so bad, and they play the blues so bad." You know, that was his attitude. So, you know, a lot of people want to be musicians, and they're not, and it's a scary thing. I mean, you know, it's easy to pick. You know, Hendrix used to say, you know, we got Mitch Mitchell on drums, and we got Noel Redding on the bass, and we got yours truly on public saxophone. And you know, probably a lot of people just thought that was Jimmy's freak rap, you know, that he was just being a weirdo, you know. I always thought that he meant it as the saxophone is a really difficult instrument, but the guitar is like the public saxophone, like anybody can play the guitar. I thought that's how I took it. And, you know, anybody can pick up a guitar and kind of, you know, you learn a few chords and go, oh, wow, I can do this, you know. But to really do it, to really be a Les Paul or a Steve Vai or a Django Reinhardt or a Charlie Christian, I mean, it's a lot of work. You know, I'm still working on it. It's endless. You know, you get guys like Doug Yankas from Soup, from Appleton, who was a natural, who had cranked out 200 or 300 songs in his lifetime, and is gone now. And who knows about him except for us, and you know, maybe Tracy Nelson because he played with her for a while, and John Hyatt because he played with John for a while. But other than that, I mean, Doug was right in there behind Clapton and Hendrix, and you know, crazy business.
So anything else you want to say before we wrap this up?
JonParis.com. Come visit. Come see us. And come to the reunion tomorrow, Summerfest.
God bless America.
Amen. Long live rock and roll.